Can I fix it in exchange for food?" They mocked the black beggar, his motor racing legend. "Listen, Grandpa, this isn't a soup kitchen," laughed Tyler, the youngest mechanic at Premium Auto Repair, when the black man in his 50s approached the entrance. His clothes were worn, his gray hair unkempt, but his eyes had a strange gleam as he looked at the Porsche 911 that had been sitting with its hood open for 3 days. Marcus, the shop owner, didn't even look up from his paperwork when he saw the figure approaching. "Jake, call security. These guys show up here every day asking for money." "I'm not asking for money," the man said calmly, his voice carrying a subtle authority that none of them knew how to interpret. "I'm asking for work. I can fix this Porsche in exchange for a meal." The entire shop burst out laughing. Tyler almost dropped the wrench he was holding while Jake, the senior mechanic with 20 years of experience, shook his head in disbelief. "Man, did you hear that?" Jake shouted to his colleagues. "The beggar wants to fix a $200,000 Porsche." But the man was not intimidated. His eyes scanned the exposed engine with a precision that went unnoticed by everyone except Sarah Chun, the only woman employee in the workshop, who watched the scene from the back. Something about his posture, the way he analyzed the engine, piqued her curiosity. "What's wrong with the car?" he asked, ignoring the laughter. "What's the problem?" Marcus finally rose from his chair, irritated. "The problem is that you're in my shop, acting like you have some right to be here." The man did not respond to the provocation. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, listening to the engine Jake had just started for yet another failed test. "Direct injection system," he said calmly. "Fuel pressure sensor failing. That's why the engine stalls at high revs. It's not a mechanical problem. It's electronic." The silence that followed was awkward. Jake had spent 3 days looking for exactly this kind of fault without success. "Just by listening?" Tyler asked, less mocking now. "How the hell do you know that just by listening?" But Marcus quickly regained his arrogance. "Lucky guess. Anyone can hit by chance." The man smiled for the first time, a smile that carried memories of better days. "It wasn't a guess. That specific noise happens when the sensor sends inconsistent data to the control unit. The engine cuts off the fuel injection as a safety measure." Sarah approached, intrigued. There was something familiar about that technical explanation, about the confidence with which he spoke about systems she knew were too complex for casual knowledge. "And how do you know so much about Porsche?" she asked, ignoring the angry glances from her colleagues. The man hesitated for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "I've worked with sports cars before." "Where?" Marcus asked sarcastically. "At the junkyard." More laughter filled the workshop, but this time the man did not smile. For an instant, something dark passed through his eyes, an ancient pain he carried like an invisible scar. "In various places," he replied evasively. "I can prove I'm right about the sensor. I just need a diagnostic tool." Tyler pointed to an expensive machine in the corner of the workshop. "Do you know how to use an advanced OBD scanner?" "I do." The answer was so simple and confident that even Marcus was intrigued despite himself. "Okay," Marcus said finally with a cruel smile. "I'll give you a chance. If you diagnose the problem correctly, I'll give you $20 and a sandwich. But if you're wrong, I never want to see you near my shop again, and I'll film your humiliation to post online." The man nodded calmly, as if bets like this were routine in his life. But as he walked toward the scanner, Sarah noticed something the others missed. His hands weren't shaking with nervousness. They were shaking with contained anxiety, like someone about to reveal a part of himself that he had kept hidden for a long time. There in front of all those looks full of contempt and cruel amusement, He stood firm like someone who held a secret too powerful to be revealed before the right time. If this story of prejudice and overcoming adversity touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of humiliation would become the catalyst for a revelation that no one would ever forget. The scanner turned on with a high-pitched beep, and everyone in the shop crowded around to watch what they expected to be an embarrassing spectacle. Marcus had already pulled out his cell phone, recording every move as Tyler and Jake placed bets on how long it would take for the bum to give up. $20? He doesn't even know how to turn this thing on, Jake whispered to Tyler, loud enough to be heard. But the man connected the diagnostic cable to the Porsche's OBD port with an ease that made Sarah frown. His fingers navigated the scanner's menus as if it were a natural extension of his hands, accessing diagnostic levels that Jake had rarely used in his 20 years on the job. Impossible, Tyler muttered when he saw the man directly access the engine management system. How does he know these access codes? The man ignored the comments, completely focused on the equipment screen. For a few moments, the only sound in the workshop was the electronic beep of the scanner as he scanned technical data at impressive speed. There it is, he said calmly, pointing to the screen. Code P0294. Fuel pressure sensor out of parameters, just as I said. The silence was awkward. Jake approached the machine, checked the reading, and his face drained of color. That's right, he admitted reluctantly. 3 days of searching, and this guy got it right in 5 minutes. Marcus quickly put his cell phone away, clearly annoyed that he hadn't gotten the humiliation he had hoped to film. Beginner's luck, he muttered. Anyone can press buttons at random until they get it right. The man turned to Marcus for the first time, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Do you want me to explain why this particular sensor fails on this model when the fuel filter isn't changed at the recommended intervals? The question caught Marcus off guard. He had no idea how to answer. Tyler tried to regain control of the situation. Okay, you got lucky this time, but betting on a hunch doesn't make you a mechanic. A hunch? The man smiled, but there was no humor in that expression. I can list 3 other problems this car will have in the next 6 months, if they aren't fixed now. How can you know that? Sarah asked, approaching him. There was something about his confidence that piqued her professional curiosity. The man hesitated again, as if deciding how much to reveal. Because I've seen this pattern of failures hundreds of times. Porsche 911 2011 to 2015 has a predictable sequence of problems when poorly maintained. Jake shook his head in disbelief. Hundreds of times? Where the hell did he work that he saw Porsches hundreds of times in places where cars like this were the norm, not the exception? He replied evasively. Marcus didn't like the direction the conversation was taking. He was losing control of the situation, and his authority was being questioned by someone who should have been begging for food. Listen here, Grandpa, he said, approaching aggressively. I don't know what game you're playing, but this is a serious repair shop. We don't need cheap tricks to impress anyone. Tricks? The man stared him straight in the eye. Want to see a real trick? Before anyone could respond, he walked over to a BMW X5 that had been sitting in the corner for 2 weeks. That car over there. You told the customer they need a new engine, right? Marcus tensed. It was true, but how the hell did this guy know that? The problem isn't the engine, the man continued. It's the high-pressure fuel pump, a $100 or $200 part. You quoted $15,000 for a new engine. Tyler swallowed hard. How can you tell just by looking? Because I heard the telltale noise when you started the car earlier. The man walked over to the BMW. I can prove it. Sarah watched in fascination as he opened the hood and pointed to specific components with surgical precision. Look, at these fuel lines, the wear here, the oxidation there, these are classic symptoms of a high-pressure pump failure. Jake quickly checked with another scanner and confirmed the diagnosis. His face was red with embarrassment. "My God," Sarah murmured. "If he's right, we were going to charge the customer $14,000 more for a problem that doesn't exist." Marcus realized he was completely losing control. It's a coincidence. 2 coincidences in a row, nothing more. The man stared at him with a look that made Marcus's blood run cold. For a moment, he saw something in those eyes that he recognized instinctively. The quiet authority of someone who had commanded, who had led, who had been respected. "Coincidence," the man repeated slowly. "Like when you said my diagnosis was beginner's luck." The tension in the workshop was palpable. Sarah felt she was witnessing something much bigger than a simple misunderstanding. There were layers to this situation she didn't yet understand. "Do you still want that sandwich?" Marcus asked sarcastically, trying to regain his dominant position. "Or are you going to keep pretending to be an expert on luxury cars?" The man was silent for several long seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a deep sadness that made Sarah shiver. "I've been many things in my life," he said calmly, "but I've never pretended to be something I'm not." He started, walking toward the door. But Marcus couldn't let him go. The humiliation he had planned to film had backfired, and that was unacceptable. "Hey, wait a minute," Marcus shouted. "You come here, cause trouble, do some magic tricks, and think you can walk out like some kind of hero?" The man stopped at the door without turning around. "Heroes don't exist," he replied, his voice almost inaudible. "There are only people who have lost everything and still try to help others." And he left the workshop, leaving behind a heavy silence and 4 people who were beginning to suspect that they had just met someone much more complex than he appeared. Sarah ran to the window and saw him walking slowly down the street, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders hunched like someone carrying an invisible weight. For a moment, she swore she saw him stop in front of a photo of a child stuck to a lamppost, one of those missing person photos that no one notices anymore. What she couldn't see was the tear that ran down his face as he recognized in that child's eyes the same innocence that his own daughter had lost 15 years ago, on a rainy night he would never be able to forget. Every perfect diagnosis, every moment of humiliation accepted in silence, every day lived on the streets. It was all part of a penance he had imposed on himself for a tragedy that still consumed him inside. But what the arrogant mechanics at Premium Auto Repair didn't know was that they were dealing with someone who had already lost everything once. And when you have nothing left to lose, each new injustice only fuels a determination they could not yet comprehend. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. Something about the way the man analyzed the cars, the surgical precision of his diagnosis, the way he navigated the electronic systems as if it were second nature, hammered at her mind. The next morning, she arrived at the shop an hour early and went straight to the computer. If her suspicions were correct, there would be digital traces of that extraordinary technical knowledge. Direct injection system, fuel pressure sensor, high-pressure pump, she muttered, typing in the specific terms he had used. Porsche 911, 2011 to 2015. The results left her speechless. These weren't specifications that any mechanic would know by heart. They were technical details that only specialized engineers or professional drivers would have a complete grasp of. Tyler arrived to find her still glued to the screen. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing here so early?" "Researching that man from yesterday." She turned the screen toward him. Look at these technical forums. The specifications he mentioned are only discussed in very specific circles of high-performance motorsports. So what? Anyone can read that stuff on the internet. Tyler, she said patiently, he knew the memory diagnostic codes. He didn't read it on the internet. He knew it. Marcus arrived at that moment, hearing the end of the conversation. Are you still talking about that nutcase? Forget. It's Sarah. It was luck, coincidence, anything but real talent. But Sarah had found something more intriguing. On a specialized forum from 2007, a user with the handle Dark Horse Racing had posted incredibly detailed technical analyses of the same models that he had diagnosed yesterday. Marcus, look at this, she insisted, showing him the screen. This guy here was predicting exactly the problems our beggar identified. Only 15 years before the cars. Hit the market. Coincidence, Marcus repeated, but her voice sounded less certain. That's when the workshop door opened and his reappeared. This time, he wasn't alone. An elegant middle-aged woman accompanied him, someone who clearly didn't belong in that working-class neighborhood. Good morning, he said calmly. This is Catherine Morrison, owner of a McLaren 720S that you said was beyond repair. Marcus paused. That case had been his biggest failure in recent months. A $600,000 McLaren with an electronic problem that no repair shop in town had been able to fix. Ms. Morrison. Marcus stammered. What are you doing here with he? Catherine smiled coldly. I met this gentleman last night in the hotel parking lot. When I mentioned my car problem, he gave me such an accurate technical explanation that I decided to bring him here myself. He gave you a technical explanation about a McLaren? Tyler asked incredulously. Failure of the hybrid system control module, his man said calmly. Conflict between the electric motor and combustion engine software protocols. Known defect in the 2019 models, but McLaren never publicly admitted it. The silence in the workshop was awkward. Sarah quickly checked the computer and found exactly what he had described. A confidential technical bulletin that only authorized McLaren dealers should have access to. How do you know that? Jake asked, arriving at that moment and overhearing the conversation. The man hesitated, that same evasive look from before. I've worked with high-performance cars. Where? Marcus insisted, her arrogance giving way to something resembling nervousness. Various places over the years. Catherine noticed the tension in the air. Well, if you don't want to fix his car, I can take it somewhere else. No, Marcus hurriedly said. Of course, we want to fix it. It's just that. It's just that he, the man calmly pointed at Marcus, said his knowledge was just showmanship. The situation was getting awkward. Catherine was clearly an important customer, and her presence there with his bum was making Marcus break out in a cold sweat. Maybe we can make a deal, the man said. If I fix Ms. Morrison's McLaren, you give me a real chance to show what I know. Not to earn a sandwich, but to work. Marcus looked at Catherine, then at the man, quickly calculating. If he failed, he would be humiliated in front of a wealthy customer. If he succeeded, well, Marcus didn't even want to think about that possibility. What if you don't succeed? Marcus asked. If I don't succeed, I'll never come back here again, and you can film my departure and post it wherever you want. Sarah watched, fascinated as the two men stared at each other. There was something about this negotiation that went far beyond a simple automotive diagnosis. All right, Marcus finally agreed, but you have 2 hours. If you don't fix it in that time, you're out of here for good. His man nodded and walked over to the McLaren. Her hands touched the hood with an almost religious reverence, as if she were reuniting with an old friend after years of separation. Catherine approached Sarah. "There's something special about this man," she whispered. "Last night, when he explained. The problem with my car, it was like listening to a master talking about his art." Sarah nodded, watching as he opened the hood of the McLaren with precise, confident movements. "May I ask you a question, Mrs. Morrison? How exactly did you two meet?" He was sitting on the curb looking at a small photo and crying softly. When I approached to offer help, he asked me if I had children. Catherine wiped her eyes. He said she lost her a long time ago and has been trying to find a purpose ever since. The revelation hit Sarah like a punch in the stomach. Suddenly, it all made sense. The sadness in his eyes, the way he talked about cars as if they were more than machines, the silent acceptance of humiliation. Meanwhile, a man worked on the McLaren with a total concentration that mesmerized everyone in the workshop. Every movement was calculated. Every decision was precise. It was like watching a surgeon saving a life. 2 hours passed like 2 minutes. When he finally looked up, his eyes shone with a satisfaction he hadn't shown since he first appeared there. "Done," he said simply. Catherine started the car, and it purred like a satisfied cat. The difference was audible. Where before, there had been strange noises and hesitation. Now, there was only pure, controlled power. "My God," she murmured, tears in her eyes. 3 dealerships told her it was impossible to fix without replacing the entire module for $80,000. Marcus was in shock. Jake and Tyler looked like they had seen a ghost. Sarah, however, was beginning to piece together a much bigger puzzle. That afternoon, as is prepared to leave after refusing any payment from Catherine, Sarah caught up with him on the street. "Wait," she called. "I need to ask you something." He stopped, but didn't turn around completely. "You're not an ordinary mechanic, are you?" He was silent for several long seconds. When he finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of years of pent-up pain. "I've been many things in my life. Mechanic was never one of them." "Then, what were you?" For a moment, when he turned to look at her, Sarah saw beyond the unkempt appearance, beyond the sadness, beyond the resignation. She saw a man who had once commanded $500,000 machines at 300 km/h, who had tasted victory and felt the weight of absolute loss. "I was someone who believed that speed could cure any pain," he replied, "until I discovered that some wounds only heal when you stop running from her." And he walked away, leaving Sarah standing there, realizing that she had just met someone whose story was much deeper and more tragic than anyone in the workshop could have imagined. That night, she would return to the computer with a new suspicion, and what she would discover about that man would change not only her perception of him, but everything she thought she knew about legends, downfalls, and impossible second chances. Sarah spent the entire night researching. When the sun rose, she had a discovery in her hands that would change everything forever. "David Williams," she murmured, staring at the computer screen. 3-time Formula One world champion known as the Ghost, for his ability to appear out of nowhere and win impossible races. The photos showed a younger man with dark hair, holding trophies and champagne, surrounded by crowds chanting his name, the same face that yesterday had been humiliated by a sandwich. Further research revealed the tragedy. In 2009, during a race in Monaco, a miscalculation by the team caused his car to crash at 300 km/h. He survived, but her 8-year-old daughter, who was watching from the stands, had a heart attack from the shock and died in the hospital. Her wife couldn't forgive him and committed suicide 6 months later. David Williams disappeared from the public eye that same year, sold everything, donated millions to charity, and vanished until yesterday when he showed up asking to repair a car in exchange for food. Sarah arrived at the workshop determined, but found a surprise. Marcus was recording a mocking video on his cell phone. "Guys, you won't believe the story I have to tell," he said to the camera. "Yesterday, a beggar showed up here who thought he was a mechanic. The guy was so desperate, he offered to work in exchange for food." Tyler and Jake laughed in the background, reenacting the man's moments of humiliation. "The funniest part, Marcus," continued, "is that the old man did some tricks with a scanner and now thinks he's an expert on luxury cars. I'm going to post this and get thousands of views with his face on it." Sarah felt her blood boil. "Marcus, you can't post that." "Why not? It's free content. Homeless man tries to be a mechanic and fails miserably is going to go viral because you're about to become the biggest idiot on the internet." His Marcus stopped recording, annoyed. "What are you talking about?" Sarah opened her laptop and turned the screen so everyone could see. "Folks, allow me to introduce David the Ghost Williams, three-time Formula One world champion, winner of 23 Grand Prix races, and considered one of the most talented drivers in the history of motorsports." The silence in the workshop was deafening. Marcus looked at the screen, then at Sarah, then back at the screen. That's impossible," Tyler stammered. "The guy was ordering food." "The guy," Sarah continued relentlessly, "lost everything after a personal tragedy and has been living on the streets for 15 years. And yesterday, you humiliated a world legend because he looked different than you expected." Jake approached the screen, studying the photos. "My God, it's he himself. I had posters of this man in my room when I was a teenager." Marcus was as pale as a sheet. But he didn't say anything. Why didn't he say who he was? "Because men like David Williams don't have to prove anything to people like you," Sarah replied coldly. At that moment, the door opened and David entered, followed by Catherine Morrison and 3 other elegantly dressed people. "Good morning," he said calmly. "I brought some acquaintances who would like to see the workshop." Marcus gulped as he recognized one of the figures. Jonathan Reed, CEO of Reed Automotive Group, the largest luxury car dealership chain on the East Coast. "Mr. Williams," Reed said respectfully, when Catherine told him about his impressive diagnostics, he had to come see for himself. "He's offering his position of technical director of our performance division. Starting salary of $500,000 a year, plus profit sharing. Our offer is $2 million a year." David listened silently, but his eyes met Marcus's. "Interesting how people change their behavior when they find out who you really are." Sarah approached him with a laptop. "David, you need to see something." She showed him the video Marcus was recording. David watched silently as Marcus and the others mocked her, planning to make her humiliation go viral on social media. "You were going to post this?" David asked Marcus, his voice dangerously calm. Marcus tried to explain, but his words came out jumbled. "I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't know that I was famous, that I had money." David moved closer to him. "Or didn't you know that I was a human being who deserved basic respect?" Jonathan Reed overheard the conversation, and her expression changed completely. "Marcus Thompson. Correct. Are you the owner of this repair shop?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied nervously. "Well, I just canceled the maintenance contract my company had with you. 50 cars a month, $300,000 a year. I don't do business with people who humiliate vulnerable individuals." Catherine joined the conversation. "I'm also going to recommend to all my friends at the club that they avoid this garage. A reputation like that spreads quickly among our clientele." Tyler tried to intervene. "Gentlemen, It was just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" David asked. "You laughed at his appearance, called him crazy, offered $20 for a job worth thousands, and planned to use him as a joke on the internet. Which part was the misunderstanding?" Sarah pulled out her cell phone. "Actually, I recorded everything yesterday." She showed the video where Marcus, Tyler, and Jake humiliated David, and I already posted it on social media with his real identity. 15,000 shares in the last 2 hours. Marcus felt his legs go weak. His reputation, his business, everything was falling apart in real time. David turned to Sarah. "Thank you for believing me when no one else did." Then he looked at the businessmen. "Gentlemen, I really appreciate your offers, but first I need to take care of some unfinished business here." He approached Marcus one last time. "Yesterday you said I should know my place. Today you'll find out what his is." Richard Thompson handed his card to Sarah. "Young lady, if you ever want to work for a company that values character over appearances, give me a call." As the group prepared to leave, David stopped at the door. "Marcus, that video you were going to post mocking me?" Sarah posted the real version of the story. Now the whole world can see who really needs to learn about humility. And he left, leaving behind a silent workshop and 3 men who had just discovered the true price of prejudice. Marcus looked at his cell phone and saw notifications exploding, angry comments, customers canceling contracts, suppliers cutting ties. In a few hours, premium auto repair had become synonymous with discrimination and cruelty. Jake approached the window and saw David getting into a limousine with the businessmen, while reporters who had arrived to cover the story waited outside. "Man," Tyler muttered, "we just humiliated a world legend because he looked poor." But perhaps the most frightening thing of all was not the financial ruin that awaited them, nor the public humiliation they would face. It was the terrible realization that David Williams had orchestrated every second of those 2 days, allowing them to reveal exactly who they were before showing them who he really was. 6 months later, David Williams was the technical director of Reed Automotive Group, earning $500,000 a year. Her rags to riches story had become a Netflix documentary, inspiring millions of people around the world. Premium Auto Repair closed its doors after 2 months. Marcus lost everything: his house, his car, his reputation. Tyler and Jake were fired and had to move out of town to escape the viral humiliation. Sarah, the only one who defended him, was hired by David's team with a salary 3 times higher. "Prejudice doesn't just blind those who discriminate," David said in an interview. "It blinds an entire society to extraordinary talents hidden behind appearances they can't see." Marcus tried to apologize publicly, but it was too late. He learned that humiliating vulnerable people not only destroys other people's lives, it eventually destroys his own. The best revenge was not to destroy Marcus. It was to show the world that second chances exist for those who offer them, not for those who deny them. If this story inspired his, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove it's never too late to recognize people's true